First thing we're going to do is we're going to go through just our standard. This is going to be our AutoCAD tips and tricks for 2021. This is episode 1. We have a couple of these lined out through the year, and we will make sure that you guys get notified when other ones come up and available. Now that you're on the list, you'll get an email from Lori, usually reminding you that if you haven't signed up, you can sign up for the other ones. So a couple of things. This is the AutoCAD Tips and Tricks 2021 Episode 1 webcast. Again, everyone's muted throughout the call. Please use the Q&A panel if you have any questions. I try and answer some of the questions as we go through the presentation, and then we always have a Q&A session at the end for any other questions you may have. So we're going to go ahead and begin. So a little bit about me. Those of you who don't know me, this is your first time here, my name's Ryan Wunderlich. I have 36 years of experience in AutoCAD across multiple industry segments. I'm currently one of our senior support specialists here at our Solution Center. Basically, if you call us and you have a subscription with us and you call us because you have trouble with one of your products, chances are you may get me in order to correct your problem. I currently I've taught AutoCAD as a certified instructor, and I still teach today. I teach AutoCAD, Revit, InfraWorks, Civil 3D, a multitude of other products. I've had more than 15 years in CAD management. I spent the last 8.5 years in cruise ship building before I relocated back out to Idaho. I've done 5 years support in civil survey and landscape architecture before that, and I've pretty much done everything except aerospace engineering at this point. And I just have a bachelor's in business management and a master's in organizational management. So today's agenda. First things first, we're going to talk about what's so special about Layer 0 and Defpoints. This is a common question that comes up, believe it or not, is why is Layer 0 so special? And then we're going to talk about what's the difference between turning a layer off, freezing a layer, and locking a layer. Now, it's important to know that there is differences between them and things that you can and can't do. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is units versus minus DWG units versus insertion units, INS units. And we're going to talk about all three of these things today. So what's so special about Layer 0? Well, Layer 0 has a very special importance to AutoCAD in general and to blocks. When objects are assigned to a Layer 0 and are used as a part of a block, or if you have an XREF that has stuff on Layer 0, and that block or the XREF is inserted on another layer, the Layer 0 in an XREF takes on the properties of the Layer 0 in your drawing, and the block that's inserted takes on the characteristics of that new layer. This is a very important concept to understand in the fact that there are things that are going to misbehave if you don't understand that, or things aren't going to work exactly how you want. If those objects are on a layer other than Layer 0, so if your block definition is drawn on a different layer, they maintain their original layer characteristics even if you insert or change that block to another layer. And we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls that come into play with this. And again, any data that's drawn on Layer 0 in an XREF takes on the properties of the current drawing's Layer 0, even if it's different than the Layer 0 in the XREF. So if your Layer 0 is magenta and it's a dashed or a hidden line type in the XREF drawing, and your current drawing when you XREF it in is set to white and continuous, anything is going to be white and continuous. Okay, so here's how I look at it, and this is how I describe it. It may help to think of the block function as a clear plastic overlay that defines the objects in a block. If the objects are drawn on Layer 0 and set to by layer, then they are completely transparent, and they will take on any of the properties of the layer inserted on, whether it's layer color, whether it's line type, whether it's line weight, transparency, all of those things. If you override any of these properties, or something is not set to by layer, or you do not draw that block on Layer 0, then it keeps its own properties, like it's assigned color and line type, no matter what layer it's inserted on. Also, when blocks are not drawn on Layer 0, you do get unexpected behaviors when manipulating layers. And I'm going to demonstrate this during the live demonstration. This is one of the common pitfalls. Somebody turns a layer off, and the next thing you know, half the things in their drawing disappear, and they go, well, why did that happen? Okay, it's because your blocks aren't on Layer 0. Now we're going to talk about the Defpoints layer. So Defpoints, some drawings have it, some don't. And the reason why is that the Defpoints layer is automatically generated when any dimension is created in your AutoCAD drawing. This layer stores information about the definition points of the dimensions, i.e. Defpoints. So the definition points are reference points for the dimensions. These are the same points which appear at the grip location when a dimension is selected. So in other words, these are the anchor points for your dimension. Okay? The Defpoints layer, once in the drawing, cannot be deleted. And if you try and delete it, an error message will appear. You can use the laydel command or layer delete command can be used to delete this layer, but I would not recommend it as it will corrupt your drawing. So here's the big pitfall. And this is a lot of the things that I tell people, is that many people harness the properties of the Defpoints layer to place objects on this layer, which they don't want to plot. Common thing is viewports and construction geometry. Okay, a lot of people do it. It's a common practice. However, it's not a good practice as it can lead to unexpected changes in the drawing. Okay, such as if you freeze or turn off layer 0, then anything that you have on the Defpoints layer becomes partially locked and you will not be able to select or manipulate the objects on it. That's the big one. And I'll actually demonstrate this. The other one is that sometimes when you run an audit, so if you've had a drawing crash and you run an audit, all the objects, oh, where'd my slides go? Hang on, they're there. So sometimes when running an audit command or a recover, all the objects that are placed on the Defpoints layer get transferred to a new layer called audit bad layer. While it is not common, it can happen, and those objects move to the new layer now plot because the audit bad layer properties are set to plot. And I'll show you how we turn off that plot properties when we're in the lay on, off, and freeze practice. So the best practice note, make a layer named no plot or similar and set its properties to not plots and use that for any non-plotting objects you need. If you don't have a good practice or you don't have a good standard for that, then refer to the NCS or National CAD standards or the AIA standards, as they include no plot layers in those standards. So with that, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of layer 0 Defpoints and some of the issues that we run into. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you here is we have 3 doors. Okay, this door is drawn on layer, is inserted. These are all blocks. This one's inserted on layer 1. This one's inserted on layer 2. And this one is also inserted on layer 1. Notice that this block definition has multiple colors where this one does not. So if I go into my layer properties here, and we can manipulate some of these things and you can see what I'm talking about. All right, let's come down here. So if I change the color of layer 1 to, let's say, be green, you'll see that this now updates to green. The reason why this occurs correctly is that this block definition here is, it's called door-1, and it is actually drawn on layer 0. So it inherits all of the same properties. If I change this to a dashed line type, it picks up the dashed line type. Now this drawing right here, this block definition right here, this is door-2. And again, its color is certainly bi-layer and it's on a phantom layer, but if I change this to dashed, it updates to dashed. If I change the color to magenta, it updates to magenta. So both of these blocks are set to bi-layer for the color, and they're all drawn on layer 0. Now we're going to talk about this block, because you'll see as we've manipulated these things, these do not change over here. And that's because this information here, if I look at this block, we have walls. See, I can turn the walls on or off. I have the door swing, I can turn it on or off. And I actually have the door itself and I can turn it on or off. Now, the important thing to notice here is that I can manipulate this information here. And if I click on this block, you're going to see that this block here, and we're going to play with this, is drawn on layer 1. And if I freeze layer 1, that door disappears, even though the geometry is not drawn on layer 1 because it's inserted there. If I turn layer 1 off, it does not disappear. So sometimes, depending on how you use freeze and thaw versus on or off, which again is the next component of this webinar, will show how this manipulates. So that's one of the things that I really wanted to make you guys aware of, is that this information here is where your problems come in. So for example, if you freeze layers typically and suddenly half your blocks disappear, most likely those blocks were drawn not on layer 0 and they're inserted on the layer that you just froze and it disappears. So we're going to do something easy. I'm just going to show you a simple rectangle here. So this is going to talk about the Defpoints layer, right? So I've got this rectangle right here. It's drawn on layer 0. And now what I'm going to do is just put in a dim, any dimension line from here to here, right? And what I'm going to do now, you'll see it automatically creates that Defpoints layers. All right, Amy, hang on just a second. I'll come back. Well, all right. So yes, so this block definition here, if I go into my block editor, so BE for block editor, and I'm going to edit door 1, you're going to see that my information here in this block, hang on, lock location all unlocked, so I can move this, right? You're going to see that this door right here is all drawn on layer 0. And if I look at my extended properties, the transparency is set by layer, line weight is by layer, line type is by layer. Okay. So if I were to change the line type to be dashed, just as an example, and then I close and save the definition to door 1, and I go back to my layers here, and I change this from my layer 1 back to continuous, you'll see that this door definition does not update because I've overridden that property as a dashed line. So this block is all drawn on layer 0. This block is all drawn on layer 0. This one was not. So let's go back to this one. Let's open up the block editor. We're going to see that we have our door here, which is on the door layer. We have our wall components here, which are drawn on the wall layer, and we have our door swing here, which is on the swing layer. Okay, this is one of the pitfalls. And if you guys work with exported Revit models, this is what your doors look like. So you're going to have some manipulation in some of those objects. So again, coming back to our Defpoints, we put a dimension line in here that automatically creates the Defpoints layer. So now if I draw a line, and I'll draw a rectangle, right? And I'm on the Defpoints layer, that's my current layer. If I go ahead and make layer 1 my current layer, and I go ahead and turn off layer 0, you'll see that those objects disappeared, and these objects I can no longer interact with. I can't select them. They've got no grips. None of this. So I cannot manipulate these, but I can manipulate these just fine. This is one of the pitfalls of using Defpoints as your catch-all. So what I usually recommend is that we come in here, and for example, right here I have a layer I called viewport, and you'll see right here there's a little printer icon, and it says plot, and if I select this to not plot, it's not going to plot this layer. Right, so if I come back here, we're going to turn on layer 0 again, and you'll see now I can manipulate these objects. This is one of the pitfalls of using, this is probably the biggest pitfall if you're using Defpoints and you ever turn off or freeze layer 0. And if we freeze layer 0, we get the same thing. Okay, blocks pulled from, okay, so now we've got a couple of questions here. Let's see, hang on just a second. You've used on and off and not freeze-thaw. What's the purpose of freeze-thaw? I will show you that, Steve. That's the next bullet point that we're going to go through. Can you explain the difference between using a no plot and Defpoints to hide objects? Honestly, the only difference is that anything you put on the Defpoints layer, you run the risk of it corrupting your drawing, and all of those objects get flipped to that audit bad layer, just like I talked about in there. And how would you handle some of this with dynamic blocks? Well, that depends, Brad. You can certainly set dynamic blocks with its own layer information, display states, and things like that. Really, you just have to be cognizant of the fact that anytime you add an override or you set layers, if you do not insert them on the correct layer, you're going to get some strange behaviors. What about blocks that are pulled from palettes? Well, that's up to you. So when we are pulling blocks from palettes, basically ignore using Defpoints layer and don't use it for any CAD objects. That's my recommendation, Mark. That is absolutely my recommendation. Blocks that are pulled from palettes. So if you have a palette that's built, right? We'll come back here. We go Control-3 to open up my palettes. So this door Imperial right here, I can go to the properties of this, and you're going to see that I can actually specify a layer. If you guys use palettes for your layers or for all of your blocks, my recommendation is put the correct layer in here you want those blocks on. That's going to help you out. Otherwise, it's just going to use the current layer. So whatever layer I have here is where it's going to insert it. That's all I want to show you. Let's see, if you want to make blocks out of objects that were not drawn on layer 0, should you go to layer 0 before you make the block? That's really up to you. You can certainly make a block from those objects, go back into the block editor and move them all to layer 0. There are some other routines out there that you can find. I've written one myself that basically flattens all the block geometry of any block in your drawing to color by layer, line type by layer, and flattens everything to layer 0. Let's see, there's any advantage to defining block attributes by layer than by block. I prefer by layer just so that they take on the attributes of whatever layer I put them on. There's no real advantage other than that. When you have it on by block, it does not pick up the same definition of where it's inserted. All right, so that's all about that. And again, we turn off layer 0. We cannot manipulate these objects. So just be aware that's one of the pitfalls of using Defpoints. It's intended to be there, but it was never intended to be used as a catch-all for geometry you didn't want plot. It was for years, and then AutoCAD gave us the ability to turn off plotting here. So that's why I have a viewport layer in here that's set to not plot. All right, moving on. So the difference between turning off, freezing, and locking a layer. Some of my drawings have a 0 Defpoints layer. Is this correct? Every drawing that comes into AutoCAD should always have a 0 layer. If you have a drawing that comes from outside that does not have a layer 0, AutoCAD automatically creates it. If you have a 0-Defpoints layer, that's a manually created layer. You'll either have 0 or Defpoints, or actually you'll always have a 0. You may have a Defpoints if you've ever put a dimension in. If you've never put a dimension in, then the Defpoints layer won't be there unless it's coming from an inserted block. So the difference between turning off, freezing, and locking layers. So when I teach AutoCAD, this is a concept that I cover that's not in the coursework. Jagal, really, you should never use Defpoints. It's just let it be what it is, create your own non-plot layer and use that instead. That's my recommendation. It helps prevent problems from occurring in your drawing where audit sometimes may trigger a bad audit layer and throw all that stuff there. So there's a distinct difference between turning off, freezing, and locking layers, and these differences are important to know. Okay, when you turn a layer off, it only changes the visibility state of that layer. Objects are still selectable and editable by various means. It's called Defpoints because it stands for definition points. And it's a throwback to the older years where your dimensions actually created 2 little nodes on the Defpoints layer. And when you exploded the dimension, you could actually go in and select those. So getting back to here, so objects that are selectable and editable by various means. So you have quick select and select similar, depending on your settings for select similar, and command line parameters such as last, previous, and all. When you lock a layer, it prevents objects from being modified, changed, or selected. Objects are still visible. They're generally faded back. That's the lay lock fade control system variable and controls the amount of fade. And when you freeze a layer, essentially it behaves as both an off and a lock at the same time. Objects that are on a frozen layer are not visible, cannot be interacted with. However, they can still be modified using .NET, VBA, or Lisp code. An additional part to know, so new viewport freeze right here. This freezes any layer you've created anytime you create a new viewport in a paper space tab. And VP freeze when you're in an active model space viewport in paper space, it freezes that layer only in that viewport, and objects will still be visible in model space and any other viewports. You can also utilize changing color, line type, line weight, and transparency by specific viewport. So you could literally draw everything color white on your drawing in model space, and then in paper space, you could turn around and manipulate colors and line types and all of that stuff. Right? And now I'll give you a demonstration of that since we are just motoring right along. Right, so we come back here and I have this layout tab. Okay. Right, so when I make this active, this is that active viewport. When I go into my layer dialog, you're going to see that I now have VP freeze available to me. So now I can VP freeze this, and you'll see those objects I drew on the Defpoints layer disappeared. Right, they disappeared here. If I come back out to my model space, you're going to see that they're still there. So I'm freezing only in that viewport. Right, if I create a new layer, and I can do any number of things. So for example, I have some stuff here. I'll turn this back on. I will change the color of the Defpoints layer in just this viewport to magenta. Since these objects are by layer, they pick up magenta in this viewport. And then I come back here to model space and they're still white. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the difference between, so I'm going to draw just a simple line. Okay, I drew a simple line right here. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to layer 0 and I'm going to turn off my layer 1. Right, you'll see that my line that I just drew, but I can move and I can select L for last. And you'll see that it tells me down here that it found one object. Oh, where is that? This is a common thing I run into. All right, so if I turn my layer off and I go Q select, and I'm going to grab a line whose layer equals layer 1 and hit OK. You'll see it says one item selected. Now I can move that item. And when I turn my layer back on, I've now moved that line up here. So all I did was turn off the visibility. That line is still selectable by various means, okay? If I go ahead and lock this, so I put the padlock on layer 1, you'll see that they faded back. You'll see I can click on it, it will highlight, but I get no grips. Okay, no grips whatsoever. And I can't manipulate that object. So if I try to do the same thing where I go back to my Q select and I go ahead and look at line and I want to grab whose layer equals layer 1 and I hit OK, it's going to tell me one item was selected. And if I try to move, it says one item was on a locked layer and basically won't let me do anything with it. If I turn this back on, unlock this, right? And now we've got our grips back and I put it back here. If I freeze this And now I go Q select line, whose layer equals layer 1. You're going to see that it comes with 0 items selected. The reason why that 0 item is selected because the object is both frozen and that object is not only frozen, but it is also turned off. So we have no visibility and no ability to interact with it. Is a line on a layer that is turned off selectable inside a crossing window? No, you can only select it through certain means. It is not normally selectable. When overriding the color using VP color, does that now plot used with that new color according to CTB? It plots according to the CTB file if you use color-based plotting. So if I come in here, these will plot CTB according to magenta for this viewport only. And if I create a new one, a new layout here, you're going to see all of my colors are restored back to normal. All right. And Sheet Set Manager is a way to drag a viewport without the default that all the other layers in the sheet automatically freeze. That's a different question. We won't be covering sheet sets today. Just be aware of that. And let's see, in one of my previous ones, Joel, just so you know, I've covered locking viewports. You come over here, you select your viewport, and you want to lock this once you've set your scale, because if I'm in unlocked mode, I can zoom in and out here by accident. If I lock this by clicking the padlock here, now when I make model space active, it zooms in and out the whole way. I did cover that in a previous one, but I will just cover that briefly here. Let's see, anybody else? Let's see, I can't see others' comments. Is that how you? Yes, Luis, the comments are for me, and I try and tell you what the comment is, and then I try and answer it. So that's where we are here. Let's get back to here. So that's really the big difference between turning off, freezing, and locking layers. Are there any past webinars on a website for viewing? Yes, Jennifer. If you would send her the link to that, I will also have that at the end of the demo of our demo here, where we're going to actually point you to the right resource for where you can go look at these past webinars. Now we're going to cover the last one, units versus minus DWG units versus INS units. So units launches this dialog box. Basically, this is where you can set up your drawing units. Okay, minus DWG units is the command line version to set up, that sets up to modify the units box here. It also has some additional parameters to rescale data already in the drawing. Okay, Jacqueline, I will make a note of that. You've been printing from model space forever. Have you done, or could you do a session on viewports? I can do that. Okay, and then INS units is the insertion scale parameter listed on the right. That's only controlling this piece right here. So it's set with the drawing. It's a drawing variable. This is the important thing to know, is that insertion scale here, the INS units, is set as a drawing variable. It is not set as a system variable. So every drawing you open, this can be different. So units is always drawing or template specific. You need to set this each time you open up a drawing or have it preset in your template. The big note here is some verticals like AutoCAD Architecture reset your DWG units every time you open it, so be aware of that. So if I create a drawing in Civil 3D that uses our standard engineering type, tenths of feet, and I bring that drawing into, or I open up that drawing in AutoCAD Architecture, it will reset my units to architectural units. Just be aware of that. Some of the verticals do that. If your INS units here is set to unitless or 0, then your AutoCAD options controls what happens. So this becomes a system variable. When the default settings in the units are set to unitless, it says your source content, in other words, your drawing, it will assume it's always inches, and your target drawing unit is always inches. And you can set these variously into various States. So the INSUNITS system or drawing variable accepts values 0 to 24. However, only 0 to 21 are actually available. 22 to 24 are reserved, but don't have anything defined that makes sense. So right here is our different INS units, right? If you want to draw in angstroms, go for it. If you want to draw in astronomical units, light years and parsecs, you can actually do that. You're going to have some really interesting drawings, and I'd really like to see anyone drawing in parsecs. Okay, just letting you know. And now we're going to go through a demonstration of units versus -DWG units versus INS units. All right, come back here. Here's my units drawing. I'm going to go ahead and close this. So you're going to see here, when regen a drawing, does frozen layers regen also? They may, depending on whether or not they need to be regened, but generally speaking, if you have frozen layers, they don't regen. However, when you unfreeze them, they will. So if I look at my units here, right, we're in fractional units. Our precision is set to a 16th, and we're inserting anything as inches, and here's our standard decimal degrees. So if I have a metric block, for example, I will use the classic insert because I can show you this much better. This block right here is drawn in millimeters. And when I click open here, you're going to see it automatically knows that this is in millimeters and automatically applies the scale factor here. So when I insert this, you're going to see this is 50.8 millimeters, but it inserted it correctly because of how this was set up right here to inches. Right? In my AutoCAD options, my user preferences, I'm currently set to inches in here as well. So that's units, right? And if I look at my INS units in this drawing, it's currently set to 1, right? And if we go back to our list here, 1 is set to inches, right? This all makes sense so far. Now we're going to talk about the big one. This is the one that gets people in trouble, -DWG units. Right, the first thing it's going to ask is, what do we want to set our drawing units to? So if I say, and you've only got 6 choices here, so if I'm going to reset this to 3 for millimeters, you're going to say drawing unit display formats. Do I want it in scientific or decimal? I'm going to select decimal here. Linear display precision, in other words, this is how many decimal places. We'll go ahead and select, I'm going to select 2 decimal places because I don't need that. Do I want to scale objects from other drawings upon insert? Yeah, we'll say yes to that. Match the insertion units to the drawing units. We'll say yes to that. Here's the big one right here. Scale objects in current drawing to reflect the change in units, yes or no? If I select yes here, it is actually going to scale everything in this drawing up by a factor of 25.4, which is 1 inch, or basically the scale factor here. Include objects in paper space. In this one, I'm going to just say no. And what you're going to see here when we come back is it's actually modified all of these things here. Now, our dimension style still is showing fractional because it's set fractional, but it scaled everything in this drawing up by that factor. So that's the main difference, right? So if I go now to my units and I look at it here, you're going to see we're decimal, 2 decimal places, and now we're set to millimeters. So again, because this is set to millimeters here, our AutoCAD options ignores our user preferences here for insertion scale. So now, if I go into units here, and I go ahead and set this to unitless, right here, and now I insert one of these blocks again, right, we go back to my classic insert, right, and you're going to see that my block unit here is millimeters, and I click OK. And because it's unitless, it automatically assumed that this was unitless. and it scaled this up by a significant factor this time, and it left it alone because it's unitless. Trying to set up a new dimension. Okay. So Mitchell, yeah, we can definitely talk about dimensions. That may be a good one to have in a future webinar where we talk about getting your dimension styles in there, or how to fix what's wrong in other people's drawings. There's a big process to go through that. Right, so when it inserted this, it saw millimeters because that's what it was set to at unitless. That's why it did that. Any questions on that? So I just wanted to cover those three things. Primarily, units is where I like to work in. If you get a drawing that was drawn in metric and you need to convert it to inches or feet and inches, things like that, you can definitely use the -DWG units. Understand that it's going to rescale everything, or it's going to prompt you to rescale everything, where it asks us to it basically prompts us to rescale. Why can't I? Oh, I have that dialog box open. Continue. Right here where it says scale drawings in current drawing to reflect the change in units. You can have AutoCAD do the scale factor, or you can also remember it yourself, right? This one's really easy. So to go from inches to metric, or to go from metric to inches, you times by 25.4. To go the other direction, it's 0.03937007874. All right, what command did you use? DWGUNITS will scale Z values as well. It scales all of the objects by that factor. So what command did you specify the units info? So, okay, going back to here, units is the command, and that brings up units, brings up drawing units right here. So this is where we can change this to architectural, decimal, engineering, fractional, or scientific. We can change our precision, and we can say we want inches, feet, US survey feet, etc. One of the things to know, US survey feet was added in the 2018 version. A US survey feet is slightly larger than an imperial foot, and it's a factor of 1.00006, somewhere thereabouts. Okay. Don't use US survey feet unless you absolutely have to. It's going to cause things that get inserted to be slightly off. If you are using a vertical like Civil 3D, don't set it here to US survey feet. Leave this basically leave this alone here. And then in your Civil 3D properties, tell it to scale objects inserted from other drawings, and it will correctly pick up whether or not you're using imperial feet or survey feet. Okay. Oh. Right, and I'm going to set this back to fractional 16th inches. Okay, so that's all I really had to cover with this. Is it common that site files from surveys were developed in survey feet? That is an excellent question, Mike. Almost all survey data that you get, or anything that you get from a surveyor, will be done in survey feet unless they're using metric. Especially if they've set coordinates and zones. One of my previous webinars, I talked about going to the geolocation and setting a coordinate system. Generally speaking, if you set a coordinate system in Civil 3D, you are actually going to be in full survey feet, and that's how they draw. So you're going to see that a lot. Is there a way to have dimensions I put on a detail in paper space automatically match the scale of the detail without changing it in the expanded properties? Depends on whether or not, if you're putting dimensions in paper space, that's one method. If you're doing your detail in model space and bringing it over to paper space and you want your text and stuff to all have the same height, even if you zoom in and zoom out, we need to have a deeper discussion on annotative scales and using annotative dimensions that will properly update. How would you match the properties of the metric block to the imperial in that drawing? right? Since these are block definitions, if I explode them, you'll see they all now look 50.8. Now these dimensions were drawn using a metric dimension style. And since I have all my annotations on, that's what you see here. Do you have classes that go through all of this slower? Since this is one of our webinars, a lot of this information is just, this is just force feeding you a lot of this information like this. We do send you the link so you can go back and look at this at any point in time. We do post it up on our website. We don't have any specific classes, or at least I don't teach any specific classes, but I know that we have some live online lecture series. And that may be something that Lori can point us to in the right direction for that. So match properties to the.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm going to send, is it Lois?
Yeah.
My email address so that she can email me and I will get her in touch with somebody in the company.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right. So that is pretty much what we've got. So you can submit a question. All of you have been doing really awesome submitting questions so far, right? So at any point in time you want to go back over anything, it's resources.imaginit.com/AutoCAD, and that will actually take you to our, let me get my website up here. Hang on just a second. I'm going to bring that.
Yeah, he's going to share his screen. In the meantime, if you guys are in, if you guys can see the chat, I have the live link in the chat that is going to take you guys right to the AutoCAD page, and that's where it should be called the Ryan Wunderlich page, but it's got all of his webcasts, white papers, blogs, everything you can imagine.
Right. So here's everything you need to know about AutoCAD all in one place. So if you're talking about installation, here's a walkthrough on how to install AutoCAD. Here's AutoCAD blocks with dynamic levels of detail. If you get export screening notices, how to get views to plot black and white in viewports. If you're using hidden visual styles and using things like that, how to adjust visual styles for plotting when using a hidden view style. I see this a lot with isometric drawings, right? How to turn quick properties on and off. There's a lot of information in here. Here's my, again, installing AutoCAD. I've got a number of videos here. Where is it? I think down here. Here's one I did with our facilities management group. Here's some tips to improve some performance. Here's how to quickly rebuild a drawing to a newer version. If you're curious, do you have anything specific to Mac users using Parallels? All right, well, all right, I can give you some answers to that one, Jay. Honestly, Mac on Parallels, the problem that I usually run into with Mac on using AutoCAD for Mac on Parallels is the fact that it's trying to share your video card and your resources on Parallels. That's one of the major things. Now, if you're using just plain AutoCAD, you should switch over and use AutoCAD for Mac. Most of the same functionality exists. And if you upgrade to the newer version of 2021, Mac actually can run most Lisp routines if you have some third-party stuff. If there's a specific reason why you're using AutoCAD in a Windows environment in Parallels, that's something else. Or if you're using one of the verticals, that's something we can have a deeper discussion about at some point. Any recommendations on where to learn how to create isometric drawings? I don't have any off the top of my head, to be perfectly honest with you, because there's not a lot of people who are doing that these days. Yep, and what I would recommend is that if you don't need your AutoCAD and your Mac environment at the same time, switch over and use Boot Camp. You can definitely use YouTube for isometric drawings. There's a couple of settings in AutoCAD where you can change your your drawing lines to go isoplane top, isoplane left, right, etc. to help with some of that. And let's see, I've got quite a bit in here. Any of you have dealt with really old drawings? Here's my webinar on AutoCAD versus AutoCAD LT, and I thought my XREF one would have showed up here. All about XREFs.
It should, yeah. It may be closer to the top.
Oh, yep, right here. AutoCAD XREFs tips and tricks. Here's everything you ever wanted to know about XREFs. So there's that. And most of my webcasts should appear here. Ordinate dimensions, let's see. Wow. Yep, here's how to create some custom line types in AutoCAD-based products. Here's my top 3 AutoCAD tools, save you some time. Wow, I have a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, here was some basic tips and tricks with me, and I believe this was we did a short webinar here, and then we just opened up the floor. You guys can ask any question you want, and we tried to get it answered, or it got pushed to later webinars if I didn't have time. Here's what's new in AutoCAD 2021. So if you have not taken a look at what's new in 2021 versus the version you may be on, that might be something to look at. But it's all here. I mean, there's a lot of content in here. I wrote a lot of this, but it's not all my work. So here's my what's new in 2020. Here's another tips and tricks, another tips and tricks. Here's another tips and tricks. Oh, wow, there is a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah. We've got search words too, so if somebody is searching for something specific, hopefully they'll be able to navigate and find it.
Right, like I can come up here to the search and hit XREF, and it's going to show me blogs on XREF and videos on XREFs. Okay, so that's pretty much what I have here. And yep, okay, yep. If you are using Revit, then you're gonna be forced to use either Parallels or Bootcamp. You might find that if you have trouble with Parallels because of the shared resources, you may need to take a look at Bootcamp. And let's see. Seen a lot of AutoCAD drawings plotted to PDF that have all of the text show up as comments. This is really showing down the display of the PDF in Acrobat. All right, that depends on how it was plotted and what driver was used. Some of them actually come up as comments, some of them do not. You can turn that off, and I think I came across that one. And if not, I will come back and figure out how to turn that one off, because I know I saw it in, I think it's in one of our, I think somebody wrote a blog on that, because I've definitely come across that before. And it may not be under the AutoCAD blog, it may be somewhere else, but I've seen that, what you're talking about, and it's usually, want to say it's a Bluebeam issue where it's being plotted out using the Bluebeam PDF and it creates comments for all the text. Let's see, will I have a webinar on templates and dynamic blocks? Well, Brad, I probably could. Dynamic blocks is a pretty huge animal. That's more than just a webinar. That's actually that's probably one of our live online classes, because I could cover dynamic blocks for 2 hours and it probably wouldn't be as far along as you'd like. Sometimes my viewports disappear and I can find them. What could be causing that issue? Well, Jay, that's going to depend on a number of things. What layer your viewport's actually drawn on. Sometimes it's a corruption inside of your layouts. In some cases, I have a little script that I wrote in VBA that actually will return the visibility state to the viewport frames. So that's one of the things that we can talk about. Second, the request for instruction on paper space versus model space. Okay, that might be an excellent webinar for later. Yep, turn off PDF SHX. For isometric drawing, yep, you go into object snap settings, snap and grid, snap type, set it to isometric. Yeah, see, all the people are helping out. So PDF SHX, that's comment. Do you recommend a program used to convey PDF or TIFF drawings back to CAD? Oh, yeah, to convert. Well, if the PDF was vector-based PDF, you can import that directly back into AutoCAD as CAD geometry. If it's a TIFF drawing, I will be honest with you, Mitchell, that there is a lot of programs out there that can do kind of a job in order to do that. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up doing a lot of tracing. I have not found any program yet that's going to get me a TIFF or a raster-based PDF into AutoCAD without doing a lot of manual tracing. Let's see.
Well, we've got about 300 people that are still on. How about you? How about we launch that last poll just to see? So we've decided to do polls because we think they're interesting and we gather a ton of information. I had no idea today that we had so many new people on. I was actually quite surprised by that. So one of the questions, like, Ryan does this stuff, he puts it together and sends it out. And I said, wouldn't it be great to find out what was your biggest takeaway from today? So having that information in the follow-up email will be very helpful to everybody who attended today. The other thing I did, so the next webcast we have is April the 15th. We have a topic, we have the title for that. We're not allowed to promote it right now, but I do have the link to the registration. It's a messy link, but it's also in the chat. So if you want to, you're gonna get an email anyway, inviting you guys to the next one on April the 15th. I just thought if you wanted to get ahead of it, the link is in the chat. And I think moving forward, in the past, our company would send an email 2 weeks out and then one the day before, but I don't think we're going to be doing live events for the remainder of the year. And one thing we don't want to do is inundate you with emails. So they are going to move down to one email for an invite and then the follow-up.
All right, Lori, you faded out just a bit. Tool palettes and tool palette groups. Brett, that's going to be a fairly substantial topic. It can be done. It's complicated. It's not as easy as Autodesk makes it out to be, but it can be done. There's about four, I'd say there's really three things that control all of that. And they don't talk about the one major component, but that's something we can definitely discuss at a later date.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I changed to another headphone. I guess it got overheated. Okay. So did you bring us back to are we back into the slides again? I moved.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'm going to share the results.
All right.
So units versus DWGUNITS versus INS units took the lead. What's so special about layer 0 and Defpoints? That was a very popular topic. I know some of you did understand layer off, freezing, and locking, but I run across a lot of people who don't know the difference. Let's see. You receive drawings from several different customers. They're really slow to run on AutoCAD. Is it possible that they have too many different layers? Well, Billy, I might have a good suggestion for you. There is, in the AutoCAD blogs, there is a portion, or I have done a write-up, a blog on how to clean drawings for your organization. There is a good chance that there may be other things in that drawing causing slowness, and I talk about how to prepare that drawing for use in your environment. All right. Any other? Actually, we're right up against the time, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
Let's see. Will multi-leaders ever be able to match viewport orientation? No. not currently, but I would love for you to put in there is a portal. Hang on. Before you disappear, I want to get your feedback on. All right, so let's get this over here. There is actually a feedback portal for Autodesk for product feedback. And where is it? Product feedback right here. So it's www.autodesk.com/company/contact-us-product feedback. Put your email address, your country, select the product, select this, and put in a comment here. More people ask for it. This right here will give them product feedback. This feedback actually does go to them, and they do actually respond back to you. And this is more or less the same as the Augie wish list. For those of you who are not familiar with Augie, that's the AutoCAD Users Group International. But one of the things is that if you submit it here, if enough people want it, it ends up on their radar list, and then it will actually be incorporated into a product at some point. So again, let's put this in here. Let's copy this. Let's see. Oh, sorry, let me hide your poll. There we go. Right here. Now we can see. Now everyone can see this. I'm going to copy this.
Oh yeah, great.
And I'm going to put it right here for everybody to see. All right. So James Everett, that link is for you. And anybody else who is curious about having multi-leaders and match viewport orientation, that's the best one to use right there. Put in that, go to product feedback and put a comment in there, submit it to them. You'll get a response back from Autodesk. They'll actually take a look at it. Most likely you'll get an automated response, and then somebody will actually, it says, do not support requests. This right here is all for improving the product. And I tell people all the time, if you want something bad enough, you come in here, you talk to all of your other AutoCAD users, and you have everyone that you know put it in here. The more people that put in a comment here for the same thing, the more likely it is going to be incorporated into a future release. See, there's a hidden gem for you. All right, with that, it's time for us to disconnect. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Yep, I turned my camera back on just to say goodbye to everybody, but I have two screens, so make sure that I'm looking at everybody. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Ryan, as always. Again, if anybody has any questions, my email address is in there, llelliott@rand.com. That goes directly to me. And if there's anything that I can help you with or forward it off to Ryan, please feel free to reach out. And please also feel free to send us messages on future topics for this